Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another fabulous episode of the Silver Liming. If you're not following me already, I would ask for you to go ahead and please follow me here on YouTube or any of the streaming stations for podcasts. I never know quite how to say that, but Spotify, iHeartRadio. I am finally on Apple. You can also seek me out on my own website. It's the Silver Lyming, Lyming.com. And today I have with me another great guest. I always have such beautiful people. The Lyme experience has just brought forth so many wonderful people. And today I have Dr. Chris Mochin, and he has been struggling with Lyme. I think now, Chris, you take the record for 50 years. That's probably the longest of anybody that I know that I've talked with that has had Lyme disease. And I know you've been through it twice, actually. You had said when you were 10 years old and again when you were 44. So, for those of you who are not familiar with this thought, not to give you more things to keep you up at night, but you can get reinfected with Lyme. You get bit once, you heal yourself, put all this effort into moving forward, and you unfortunately can get reinfected with something completely different, even too. It doesn't even necessarily have to be the same array of what you had before. So please be mindful of that when you're going outside. Just take some time to do preventative measures and put on some repellent, tuck your socks into your pants, wear a hat, light colored clothing, anything you can do to help yourself stay safe. Because as Chris is going to share now, his story with Lyme disease and tick-borne illness, this is definitely not something that you want to come into contact with. You do your best at all costs to stay far away from ticks. But Chris, if you would, please go ahead and share with us your stories. I guess it would be story, but about your experiences and your incidents with Lyme and tick-borne illness.
Sure, and thank you for having me. My Lyme story goes back to age 10. My family's home was flooded during the 1972 flood. Agnes had come up out of, I think it was down, it was in the Caribbean, and then it came up the coast, stalled over New York State, flooded our valley. We couldn't live in our home because it was so flooded. So we had to move into a trailer that HUD had provided us, and we were in our backyard. So my father wanted to take us out of there for a little while. So we went to Connecticut to visit relatives. And we were on the Connecticut beaches that week. And I remember coming back to my aunt and uncle's place. It was close to 90, and they had the air conditioning on. And all of a sudden, we came home one night, and I was shaking, like I had the chills. And my mother looked on the back of my neck because it felt like something was hot back there. So she looked in and she saw that I had had some kind of a bite. Well, it turned out it was a bullseye rash. Um, didn't think anything of it. Had it checked by a doctor. Not, they didn't know what it was. They just thought maybe an insect. And when I came back home, um, the following year, when I went back to play Little League, I had a great 10-year-old season. Um, I was not the same player. I had put on weight. I was afraid of the ball. I had no stamina. I couldn't run very well. And that was a complete dichotomy from what it was when I was 10 years old. So, I lived with it for so long. I remember having great anxiety as I was going through grade school and high school. I would have issues with ITP, which is idiopathic thrombocytopenia purpura, and that's the common name for that is bruising, but nobody could tell me why. So, I lived with it through high school. Um, I, every now and then I would start to feel terrible. It would be mostly in the wintertime. Then, you know, April comes around, you start going outside, you're sweating all the time. And, I felt better as the more I sweat. So I noticed, in hindsight, that every winter I would start to feel terrible again. And it was just this cycle over and over again. And when I graduated high school and I started to get out into the working world, I was working at a surgical supply company in Scranton, PA. And again, I started to bruise real easily. I'd get bloody noses regularly. and I just started to really pack on the pounds. So we were trying to figure out a way to, you know, figure out what this was, and nobody could tell me what it was. So in, I want to say 1987, um, by 87, they took my spleen out because they thought I had a damaged spleen, and after that the platelets seemed to stabilize, but then a few years later it came back. So was it the spleen that was bad? Who knows? So my mother was actually watching a talk show, and they gave her the name of a doctor in Hazleton, PA. His name was Arthur Koch. This guy was a wizard. He was a pharmacist before he became an OD. I'm sorry, a DO. And he brought me in, looked me over, and he looked at his nurse and he says, "Well, we've seen this before, haven't we?" So he treated me with a lot of supplements and herbs. He didn't give me any drugs because he knew that what he was dealing with. He just didn't tell me or couldn't tell me. And over the next couple of years, he really had my body running efficiently. I, whatever he did, he knew what he was doing. And I started to feel really good. I had dropped 65 pounds. I was running like a deer. I was playing, men's softball at a high level. I was playing all kind of recreational sports, and I seemed to be back to where I was before that incident when I was 10 years old. So I was fine. He died in 1998, and I had a hard time finding a doctor to replace him because there was nobody like him. He was way ahead of his time. So I started to feel terrible probably, I want to say 2002, because I had a relationship breakup that hit me pretty hard, and I started going out with friends, and we were getting into drinking quite a bit. And you know at that time when I went on that diet with Dr. Koch, he had me avoid sugar and yeast, and I didn't know why, but now I know why. um,
Mhm.
so after that binge, I had just started to feel terrible again. The anxiety returned. It was uh it was worse than it was the first time. And I had started to play a lot of golf and doing a lot of outdoor stuff. Like I had put up a raised bed garden in my backyard, and the one day I remember I felt this pain on my left shin, and I looked down, and there's a bullseye rash again. And I went to my doctor. Doctor said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's just a spider bite." Well, we we know that was wrong. So I couldn't find anybody else that could treat me. So I went to see another doctor in our area. Again, she told me spider bite. She did all kind of blood tests. She brought me in the one day, and I was exhausted. I could barely stay awake in her office at 11 a.m. And she said, "I can't find anything wrong with you. I'd like you to see a psychologist." And I left and never went back. I looked
Oh,
online for I looked online for a holistic adrenal specialist because I thought my adrenals were complete crash. I found a doctor with the Natural Institute of Health in Washington, D.C., and I called him. He sent me an intake packet. I filled out all 23 pages of his packet. I sent it back to him. He called me immediately and said, "Can you get down here within 3 days?" I said, "Yeah." So I got down there, and when I got there, he had all of my intake forms on a screen so we could see them. And he was showing me the different markers that he was seeing. And he said, "I'm going to test you." He says, "But I can swear to God that you have a full blown Lyme infection." So we did the testing, and sure enough, it came back positive for Lyme. I also had co-infections, and he was noticing that I had a very hard time walking. And he said, "You have fibromyalgia symptoms?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Are you having issues with your hormones?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." I said, "All of them crashed: thyroid, adrenal, testosterone." And he said, okay, he said, let's do something about your fibromyalgia first. So he brought me back a week for 3 weeks. It was on a Friday. I had to go down each Friday for the next 3 weeks. And he gave me vitamin C IV with alpha lipoic acid and magnesium. And at the end of that 3 weeks, I could walk without pain or stiffness. I
Wow.
have not had a reoccurrence since. This
Wow.
guy was brilliant. So he managed to give me cat's claw, teasel root, and artemisinin to help kill off the active infection. The artemisinin was very important because a lot of people won't tell you this, but Lyme disease, it it regrows every 28 days. It reproduces in your body. It lays eggs, and it just starts the cycle all over again. The artemisinin will kill off that process. It did for me. I noticed a big difference once we were able to stop that process. The cat's claw and the teasel root were instrumental in, helping me with the active line that was in my bloodstream and in my muscles. So once we got done with that, and my hormones started to stabilize a little bit. He wasn't sure about how to get the toxins out. So I went to Greg Lee in Frederick, Maryland, and this guy is a wizard. This guy, I can't say enough good things about him. Two Healing Center. I went down there, and within 6 months, I all of a sudden started to feel pretty good. His treatment methods were acupuncture and detox foot baths and cupping. Also, he knew everything about Chinese herbs and supplements, and he was giving me liposomal herbs, and it worked so well with me that I started to feel a great difference. The only thing now is I'm still dealing with some liver stuff. I'm trying to detox my liver. I have been diagnosed with fatty liver. Um, it could be from, I've never been a huge drinker, so it's not, an AFLD, but it's a oh, it is an AFLD. It's not from the alcohol part, but there's so much garbage in our food these days, like high fructose corn syrup. I think that's where most of my issue has come. It's like a glue, and if you don't have a gallbladder, um, you're more likely to have issues with fatty liver. I've just been
Hmm.
reading some fabulous studies about this. So as it turns out, when you lose your gallbladder, there's a reduction in bile salt production, and the bile salts are what helps keep that liver from sticking together, all the cells. So that's what I'm working on now. I feel like I'm 95% back. Once I can figure out how to get this liver clean the rest of the way, I think I'm going to be in pretty good shape.
That's awesome. And I know that you've been putting some work in on that. So I hope that your efforts do pay off. And I know that they will ultimately in the end. You will be in better
Thank
shape
you.
than when you started. I know that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I was listening, actually, I thought of you the other day because I was listening to Barbara O'Neill. Do you listen to her? God bless you. Is that anybody
Thank
that
you.
you're familiar with?
I have not. No.
Okay. And she's a lady that I listen to a lot of her teachings on YouTube. And I swear that she said fatty liver from non-alcohol can be due to dehydration, from chronic dehydration. I swear that's what she said. And so then I'm listening to you talk about all these other things like sticky, no gallbladder, it gets gunked in there. Like, yeah, so that would make a lot of sense. Like if you're too thick, it's causing that problem. So I don't know how much water you take. Another thing that she discussed was when you drink the water. So like you don't want to be drinking water with your food intake because that eliminates the bile or the digestive acids to really help with your food digestion process. Like you want to finish having water maybe half an hour before you eat and then have your food. And then maybe I think she said like an hour or two after you start drinking water again. Like you just need to give your body enough time to have the acid to do what it needs to do. So for whatever that's worth to you. And then
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you what artemisinin is that an herb? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, artemisinin, and it's usually called wormwood.
Oh, okay.
It's from yeah, South American tree bark. Um, but it seemed to work very, very well. All of these things, they sound terrible, but the taste of them really wasn't all that bad, to get the results that I did.
Well, yes, that's one way to put it too. Is when
Yeah,
you regain your life, you're probably pretty willing to swallow almost anything. Sadly, like that's I don't want people to take
right.
that contact the wrong way, but like I was just talking to somebody today and she's very desperate trying to figure out how to fix herself. And it's like you could get people in that state to do almost anything. So some yucky tasting herbs are not bad if it gets you back to where you need to go.
True.
Curiously speaking, okay, so it took that then to me that sounds like it took a really long time for you to get a diagnosis.
It did. I got the second bite in 2007. I didn't get diagnosed until 2011. So
Wow.
I was sent around the merry-go-round for 3 years or 4 years before I actually was able to get diagnosed. First time I didn't get diagnosed officially, but
Yeah.
Dr. Koch knew what he was dealing with, but he
Okay.
couldn't say.
Okay. So that's what I'm kind of thinking in my head is like, it's like decades. That's so long to go without knowing what is happening to your poor body specifically.
Hmm.
And Dr. Koch died, then it's like, now who do you go to and what do you tell them is wrong with you so that you can continue with that same kind of support and care. So
Right.
I'm sorry, but I'm kind of glad that you keep saying like, well, then I found this guy and he's a wizard. And it's like, well, good, Chris, you found some really good people to help support you through your healing journey. And that's one thing I think about a lot of times with us is like, you just have to have faith that the universe is going to be there to catch you and that the right angel or the right person, vehicle, whatever you want to call it, is going to appear for you. You just have to keep pushing forward and believing in yourself and know that you yourself are worth the effort to heal and you deserve a good quality of life, regardless of how many doctors you have to go to. But it can get difficult as you're going for that long without a specific answer or help to kind of, I think, keep motivated. What can you help me maybe have a little bit more insight into that for you actually? Like, what what helped you to kind of propel yourself forward through that time, just kind of blindly searching again for what was happening to your body? Like, how do you remember that you were able to convince yourself to keep going?
I've always had um, a drive that I don't believe in a no-win scenario, and I know that sounds Captain Kirkish, but um, there's always an answer for something. Um, there are situations when you get to the end of life, if your age is against you, or your physics from your family, your genealogy, if that all is all on the bad side, then you're kind of stuck. But there's a very spiritual side to this whole thing. You have to be able to trust the universe that they're going to put the right people in your path to be able to do this. And Lyme disease is a rich man's disease. There's not a lot of treatments that are covered by insurance. And the insurance companies sure don't want to go there because, Lyme has a very storied history in this country. I'm not sure how many people really know about why and when and where this all started. Um, you know, if somebody really was honest with us about where it came from, um, the insurance companies would have a lot to answer for, as well as the federal government. I know that the Washington Post did an article a few years ago, debunking all of the myths of where Lyme disease came from, but there are just too many smoking guns here. And all the information is available in the Library of Congress. Um, there would be somebody who would have to answer for all this, and nobody's ever going to, because it's going to be covered up and for hundreds of years. Nobody's ever going to really know. Just to keep that, you've seen the two words plausible deniability in Independence Day, the movie,
Yeah,
and that's exactly what I feel this all is. As long as everybody says, "Well, I don't know," or "I don't recall," they're all safe. Nothing
yeah,
is ever going to happen to the people who perpetrated this on us.
no. And I know what you're talking about. I've read a lot of smoking guns, as you call them, and how do you really grapple with that and come back to peace? Because ultimately that's, I think, what helps us to heal. And you sort of had touched on that too, and that this is a little bit more spiritual of a journey to get yourself back. And so if we were to think about that kind of thing solely, I suspect you're not really going to be able to get yourself better because you're putting yourself into the wrong vibration or the wrong energy. Did you figure out a good way, or was it just kind of trial and error to be able to keep, like, what I think of is like what I visualize is like, I know it's here in my heart and I feel that and I believe that, but like again, I can't hold that so close to me. So I like kind of have it at arm's length, um, to see that separate from self, to not get
Mhm.
too upset about that so that I can maintain a peaceful state. Is there something different that you do with that to help yourself not be so upset with that?
Yeah, I started to do meditation. I bought my own detox foot bath, and some people will say, "Oh, it's garbage," but you know what? I got so much relief out of that because it would lessen my liver swelling.
Mm.
It made
Ah,
me feel whole for about 3 weeks, and then I'd have to do it again. I've owned one ever since, and I'm still using one. Um, I always felt that there was something more to the spiritual side than organized religion. Um, you know, I just feel that organized religion is, the intentions were great when it first started, but again, man has bastardized it over and over again in all the religions. And now it's become a business. It's not a spirituality anymore. So I decided to bypass the middleman and start to work with Creator on my own. It led me to a lot of different people who um, were really spiritual people who helped me, get to another level. It seems every time I needed it, and it led me ultimately to theta healing, which I believe is an amazing modality. I've learned so much just by taking the courses and reading and doing meditations with it. It's for me, it's like Reiki on steroids. Um, it has worked so well for me, and I continue to use it every day. Now, most to all of my symptoms are gone, from all the work that I've done. It's just that last piece with the liver that I need to fix because that's also having an effect on sluggish hormone response. Um, but I feel like I'm in a good place right now, and once I fix the liver, the metabolism comes back, the hormones come back fully. Um, I'm on a good road here, and the spirituality end of it has really helped me get here.
awesome. And for those who are not familiar with theta, and that's another way that I've actually met you too now in person is through theta healing training. But could you explain a little bit about theta healing and exactly what that is for people who are like, wait, what's he talking about theta healing? How do they fix themselves with that?
Sure. Theta healing for me is using light meditation and sound frequency to put you into a state of healing. When we sleep at night, we are put into the theta wave, and that's like 4 to 7 hertz. And that
And the wave
frequency
you're
will
saying
allow,
brainwave, brainwave.
yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Okay.
Um, so when we get into that theta brainwave, when we go to sleep, that's when we do a lot of our healing. And through, the sound frequency and the light meditation, we can recreate that state to where we can focus our intentions on what the person in front of us wants to heal. Now, I've also started leading a 7 planes of existence meditation based on theta healing at a local metaphysical shop. And I have reached over 110 people in the last 7 weeks,
Wow.
and people are getting amazing healing results with this.
Good job.
Thank you. It's 30 to 45 minutes, and people have been having amazing experience with this. It's different every time. They receive a different healing each time they go in. So I would suggest that if anybody has any questions, ask us or, look it up and read some of the lessons that are out there. There's a lot of really good information about what it is and how it works.
Yes,
But from experience it myself, it's my connection to the creator. And I don't need a middleman to be spiritual anymore.
yes, no, and no one really does either. But for those of you who are like newer to this space or concept at all, it's so helpful to have a guide, somebody to help you, like teach you how to connect more with that energy. Or ultimately, even sometimes it's just nice. I have a space holder for me that I go to see, and she helps me connect. And it's like, it gives me a legitimate excuse and like permission almost to stop and to take the time to do this kind of thing. And I think I actually became familiar with theta brain activity more through Bruce Lipton. Initially, he was talking a lot more about our subconscious programming. And I think really from 0 to 6 or 7 years old, we're in theta, which is record mode, where we're recording all these patterns and things from society, from our parents, and it's ultimately our compass on how to survive in the world. But again, a lot of that is inherited patterns that aren't necessarily useful to us, or maybe had served us well at the time, but no longer serve us. And they're not true to our authentic self. And so through theta healing, you're also able to help people to get back into that slower brainwave state, relaxed enough, I think, as well, where you can help to reprogram a lot of that activity that's going on in there. Because when we're in our adult stage, technically speaking, I think they were saying 95% of the time we're running on that subliminal programming that we learned when we were little, and we're not even conscious of it. And so again, if we have these bad things programmed into there, or things that no longer serve us, I don't want to say good or bad, you're just going to keep running on that same thing. And so if you're looking for a perspective change or a different way to elevate yourself, again, as you called it, it's like therapy on steroids. It's just, or what did you say, meditation on steroids, whatever it is. I like it because you don't really have to hash out the details so much. And you're able to just kind of cut to the chase and help that person heal directly and pretty succinctly. So the sideways path on theta healing, but I find it very fascinating. And again, the power that we harness within self to heal self, like what you've done. You go out and you're wired that way, probably ahead of time innately. And so I think about other people too, if they don't necessarily have that innate wiring to be able to get the wherewithal, use Chris's story as fuel. Like, okay, if Chris can do it, I can do it. I did it too. It's like, if you just get curious enough about something when you don't feel well, like you're awfully curious about why you don't feel well, you can really start to ask some good questions and think about some ways to fix yourself and begin again to grow that relationship with self and creator, to find that power within to help yourself heal. Can you talk to then a little bit more about, were there particular moments in your journey that you knew that you were going to get better, or that you knew that you were healed? Did you have any kind of signs, or we call like dreams or anything like that, that you can remember that you're like, I know I've got this?
I think the biggest one was, having full blown Lyme. You've got 7 bad days in a row every week. Something is bothering you, and then all of a sudden you might have a good day. Then all of a sudden you have 2, then 3. That's when I knew that I was really starting to heal. And the one thing about Lyme patients is we have a hard time believing that we're healing. We always look for the littlest thing to say, "Oh, wait, here it is again. What's going on here?" But once you get over that hump where you start to have 3 or 4 good days in a row, that's when I knew that I had a chance here, because I was preparing for life in a wheelchair or worse. And when I had those vitamin C IVs, um, that's another moment when I didn't have that stiffness in my joints or that pain. Um, I said, I think I have a good chance here. So it was at that moment that I realized that I was going to put my trust fully into NIH and, um, Greg Lee at Two Frogs Healing Center in Frederick, Maryland. That's where I really started to make the strides, because before that, what do you do? all you know is what you've done before. And if it's your first time with Lyme, you don't have a reference. Somebody out there has got to have an answer for you, and you have to rely on that. So that's where you really have to have your mindset. But between the spirituality and the people who were put in my path, that and the way I started to feel for days in a row, that was my key to know that I was going to beat this.
I love that. And it's like you kind of get the crumbs on the trail, like your little breadcrumbs, like, okay, I'm going in the right direction. This is a confirmation from universe that, okay, they sent me this person. Great. I've got this. I can keep going. Or, whatever connection it is that you're all of a sudden able to be like, okay, I'm feeling better multiple days in a row. That's improvement. That's something to celebrate. And
Hmm.
as silly as it sounds for maybe regular people to celebrate the fact that you've got a couple days in a row that you're feeling well, like that is everything, and that is so huge. And for the people in the Lyme world, it's like, if you have a day where you're feeling good, even one day, sometimes it's like, woohoo, thank you, God,
Hmm.
I got so much done. I was able to function. I was able to think. My brain worked. It was great. Um, so that's awesome. And then did you have ways to sort of track your progress at all? Were there any tricks that you could pass along that were useful for you to kind of help, again, I guess, track the progress? Because I feel like it is more of an intangible thing sometimes to see or to feel happening to you. Did you have a tangible way at all?
Yeah, I kept a journal. Um, and I noticed different parts of my body that would hurt. Like there would be days where my forearms would hurt, and that was they were going after the sheaths in your upper arms, because Lyme disease. I'll share a few things here with you. Since I've had Lyme disease, my total cholesterol has never been above 160.
Oh,
Just cannot keep cholesterol in my body. It just has been eaten up so much by the Lyme organisms, because that's one of the things it goes after. Once you take the yeast and the sugar out of your diet, it's got to try to find something, and
yeah.
that's what it seems to latch on to, at least with me. Um, I have found that magnesium is my best friend. That really took away a lot of the pain. It helped me sleep because, when you have Lyme, you can't sleep. You're up every hour. The organism is just so alive in you looking for food that it gets you up every hour. Um, Vitamin C is another great one. Of course, the B complexes were really helpful for me. Um, but it was just self awareness that really got me through this, because I started to notice that I started to feel better. Early on, I was a mess. I just couldn't function in any way. And when you feel like you can't walk, that's a big thing. Um, I was looking for anything. I was thinking, what is this? MS? Is it ALS? Um, but sure enough, Lyme disease is the great pretender, and it will show off a lot of symptoms. So, self awareness, I think, is the biggest key, and journaling too, because your memory gets spotty with Lyme. So I would definitely keep a journal, to look back and see where you've been and how far you've come.
Yes, I think that's an awesome way to do it. And it's also kind of fun when you're actually healthy again to look back and read some of your journal entries to remind yourself about how sick exactly you were and really how much you've overcame. Because I feel like once you are healthy, it's almost hard to remember everything. Um,
It
Memory
is.
becomes spotty in a different way because you're healthy and you've not really associated with that energy any longer. And so it kind of goes away too. Um,
Hmm.
Awesome. So that's, I think, also some helpful just words of advice for people listening is just, again, to be self-aware. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that you will learn through the journey of Lyme if you are going to be successfully healing yourself is to be self-aware. Um,
Hmm.
and then, Chris, can you share with me as a final question, is there one thing or a couple things even, that's great if it is, that you would say, what are like the best things that have happened to you as a result of having Lyme and tick-borne illness?
I have really learned a lot about essential oils. I used to spend a lot of time, in outdoors, and eucalyptus oil seems to be my best protection against ticks. Um, that was a big help. just being able to delve into the spirituality of a thing like theta healing, and you know being close to other people who have gone through similar events. um, you learn the difference between ignorance and awareness. There are a lot of ignorant people out there, and I don't mean that in a snide way, but my philosophy on a lot of things is if you've never experienced it or you've never lived through it, you don't know what it's like. You have no point of reference. So I would say to the people who are listening who do not or have never had Lyme, and you have somebody with Lyme in your circle, try to be kind to them, because they're fighting a battle that you could not even imagine. And I would tell people who have Lyme to do your research, do the work, and find somebody that you can believe in and find somebody who you can trust, because this is something that makes you completely vulnerable. And unless you have somebody who's compassionate and empathetic, it's a tough road. So try to find, you don't need 100 friends to get you through this, but you got 3 to 5 good ones, you'll make it.
Yes, yes. And that's fair and valid advice. And I just came across another person, Fred Diamond, who hosts a couple different podcasts, and his wife got Lyme, and he does a lot of awareness around those who don't have Lyme and what it's maybe trying to help them to connect or relate better to it. And it is so helpful to have support through this. And so I echo those sentiments. If you do know someone who is struggling, to please just reach out to them, be there for them, be a soft landing place for them, because again, a lot of the outside world doesn't understand this because it is an invisible illness, and you look perfectly healthy and fine, but it can strike you at the worst times, and you could be having a perfect day, and then all of a sudden that feeling comes and you're like, uh-oh, and you're no longer able to function for the rest of the day, for who knows how long, many days after that. So it's really great to have support, have people to help you along, to encourage you as well, because it is a little bit tough alone. So I'm really glad that you've been
Yes.
able to get back, your life, and that it has led you into so many positive directions with spirituality and learning more about self-connection and awareness and essential oils and so many different things that I think ultimately in the end are going to better you. But
Thank
again, it's
you.
one of those wonky things that it's like, I don't know if I really wanted this way to have to learn about it, but okay, fine. And it's just strengthened connections between people like you and I, even in a deeper understanding of who we are, because we know what the other has gone through. It does make you a lot more empathetic and understanding of others. And but ultimately it is something that you can get better from. And so now we've got 2 people sitting here that are proof in the pudding that you can heal and continue on and have quality of life again and not wind up in that wheelchair. Sometimes you have to be, it's not sometimes, it's time after time that you have to be your own best advocate with this illness, unfortunately. And you have to know that you're well worth it. Ask the right questions. Don't be afraid to push doctors, because sometimes they don't know everything about this. You've got to do the research, unfortunately. Like you said, there's few and far between that are well versed enough to really fully get an illness like Lyme and tick-borne illness, because it manifests in so many different ways and it takes so many different shapes that no, it's hard for a doctor or anybody to really specialize because it can be so different. But thank you for sharing the information that you did. If you don't mind,
You're
can you
welcome.
please, again, the person that you had said was on Frog, was it Frog?
Yeah,
Frog?
it's Two Frogs Healing Center in Frederick, Maryland. His name is Greg Lee.
Okay.
He is an amazing person, amazing spiritual person. His knowledge of liposomals and herbs and supplements and treatments um, are amazing. He does not take insurance because hardly anything is covered under insurance for Lyme disease. Like
Wow.
we said in the beginning, that's an insurance issue. Um, that to me is disgusting. It's all about money these days with our healthcare systems. But there's one other thing, Ann, that I want to add. Um, that I think is important. In 2016, I was into my fifth year taking care of my parents. I had to leave a job in 2011 because of my illness, and to also take care of both of my parents who became ill at the same time. And in 2016, I had to figure out what was going to make me relevant at the end of this. I didn't know how long my dad was going to last. My mom died from brain cancer a year and a half in. So I decided to enroll at Drexel University for my doctorate. And at first, I was having a lot of issues cognitively. I had a hard time concentrating, I had a hard time remembering things. But as I started to get through each course, I noticed that my brain function was improving. So take those little moments and embrace them because you've just passed another step along the way. In 2022, I finished my doctorate. Right now, my brain function is as high as it's been in a very long time. Um, and, I feel that I have done enough work to overcome all of the neurological Lyme that I had in my body. Um, the only thing I may have is a little bit of physical, like I said before. But you can do this. It's a hard road to hoe, but you can get there. And just believe in yourself and believe in those people around you who you trust. Find one doctor that believes in you, and you can go forward. You can get better.
Thank you. That's very good words of advice. And I am picturing in a sense too, I wonder if well, I think once you start to heal, then you can really start to build the muscle again with the brain and make it work better and exercise it and start to utilize it again. And that really can be a turning point too in the healing when it's like, oh, I can think again. Oh, oh,
Yes.
oh.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Where'd that come from?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that leads me to one last thing is that
Sure.
um, I know you do a couple of different things with healing. And so I know you do card readings. I don't know if you really want to get into that, but if you don't mind, just give a brief description of the different healing modalities that you do practice and how
Mhm.
people can get in touch with you if they're interested to book a session with you, please.
Sure. I do tarot readings. I've been doing them since 1997. I started doing them as a just something that I was interested in. And I used to use one deck. I now use three decks of tarot cards because I feel it gives a more in-depth message and an in-depth reading for the people who sit for me. The other thing I do is I do theta healing sessions. I also do guided meditations. If you are having a party, I can come and do multiple readings for you or healings depending on what you want. You can reach me at cmochin@yahoo.com, CMOCHIN at yahoo.com, or 570-606-1551. If I do not answer, leave a message. I will get back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And I know that you had done a card reading for me and I really enjoyed that. And
Thank
again,
you.
I did practice with you with the theta healing energy. And I know that you're designed for this kind of work. You have just a
Mm.
very good nurturing, healing personality that I think people can really enjoy using as an accountability coach or somebody to guide them a little bit more on their healing journey. So thank you for sharing your contact information and your story with us for being vulnerable here today.
And thank you for having me. This was a pleasure.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you soon, hopefully in person.
Absolutely. Take
All
care.
right. Bye, Chris. Thank you.
Bye bye.